Hi, my name is John Petty, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Growing Up in Flip Flops. This episode is entitled Celebrity Encounters. Let me set some ground rules first here. What I'm going to talk about are three and a half celebrity encounters that I've had in my life. All but one occurred in the state of Florida, and they all occurred before the age of 21. My definition of a celebrity encounter for this episode is not simply seeing someone, not seeing Elton John in concert or seeing Bill Mazeroski at a spring training game, but instead a personal, one-on-one encounter for a period of time with a conversation occurring between that celebrity and myself. That's my definition for this purpose. My first celebrity encounter occurred in the Tampa airport. One of the duties assigned by my mother was when one of her friends needed to fly out of the Tampa airport was, well, of course John can drive you to the Tampa airport and take you through the Tampa airport and make sure everything goes great. I did that multiple times for my mother's friends. The positive thing for me was I drove the friend's car. It was a nicer car than what I had, and it had an FM radio, which meant I got to listen to Tampa FM radio rock stations that there weren't any in my hometown at the time. I obviously asked the woman that I was escorting if I could listen to this, and I wasn't listening to Led Zeppelin the whole time. So sometimes the lady said, wow, that's nice music. I'd never heard of that. So it was a win-win for both of us. Anyway, back to the celebrity encounter. While standing in line, waiting for the ticket counter with my mother's friend, who should be directly in front of me but Dan Rowan of Rowan Martin's Laugh-In, the television show. If you don't remember, he was the straight man, the guy that stood with generally a pipe in his hand, but he was a straight man of the comedic pair. And holy cow, here's Dan Rowan. I said, excuse me, Mr. Rowan, I just want to tell you how much I enjoy your show. I enjoy everything about it, just the comedy. And he turned to me and said, well, thank you. And do you mind if I ask you a couple questions? We were just standing there in the ticket line. He said, no, go ahead. I asked him, were there any skits that were censored by either the sponsors or NBC? That brought a big smile to his face, and he said, oh, absolutely. And he proceeded to tell me a couple of them. Most of them were either of a political or sexual nature that got canned. We continued in that conversation, and then I asked him, how did you get Richard Nixon to ever appear on the show? And he explained that being a very, very hot TV show, that they had all these different celebrities from different areas that wanted to get on the show for airtime just to be seen on this popular show. And it was that simple. But anyway, it was a back and forth, a wonderful conversation with Dan Rowan. I later found out that he lived on Manasota Key, just north of my hometown, and that's how he ended up flying out of Tampa Airport. Number two occurred after I moved to Chicago. While there, I was living downtown. I had ordered a pizza for pickup at a local pizza parlor. Well, I walked down there. It was not ready, and they pointed to a bench to sit down and wait. There was a older gentleman seated on the bench as well. He just looked at me and he said, how do you like the pizzas here, et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, it's my first time. It came around that I had just moved to Chicago. And our conversation basically went into a discussion of different types of pizza, different styles of pizza, pros and cons of the different styles of pizza. This gentleman was telling me of his favorite pizza places in and around Chicago. We were on that bench for about 20 minutes talking all things pizza. The other gentleman from the counter, they motioned that his pizza was ready, and we went and picked it up. And shortly thereafter, my name was called. And when I went up to the counter, the guy behind the counter said, "Do you know who you were just talking to?" And I said, "No." And he said, "That was Saul Bellow." Saul Bellow was a Nobel laureate for literature. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner for literature. I had sat on a bench in a pizza parlor for 20 minutes discussing all things pizza with a Nobel Prize winner. There you go. Kind of amazing. Number 3 occurred while I was at university in Florida. My roommate was student body president, and we had Vincent Price come to the university to speak. Because he was student body president, he was able to go behind the stage. Well, it was he and his date and my date and myself. And we eventually made our way and went to the green room and opened the door. And literally like a scene out of the Three Stooges, just opened the door a crack, and our 4 heads on top of one another, peeking in like we're not going to be noticed. Well, there, over on a couch by himself, is Vincent Price. And the kids are, "Oh my God, I have Vincent Price, wow." And I said, "I'm going to go talk to him." "Oh, you can't do that." Oh, I said, "I'll see you at our seats. I'm going to go talk to him." Well, I went in by myself. I introduced myself, and I said, "Mr. Price, may I join you?" And he said, "I'd love to have you here." So for the next 45 minutes, it was Vincent Price and I alone, seated in a green room sofa. We talked about everything. The film Young Frankenstein had just come out. I asked him what he thought about that. He loved it. I asked about what he thought about the current availability of horror scripts. He hated them. He despised slasher movies. He thought it was weak and poor writing that was happening in that entire genre, and being replaced, suspense being replaced by just gore. I asked him about his time with American International, the low-budget films of the early 60s. He loved them. He thought they were one rung away from comedy and basically viewed them as high camp. I asked him about his time portraying Egghead on the Batman TV show. He thought it was hysterical. The thing that just hit me in this conversation with him was literally how much fun this man had at doing his work. And then I asked the question that I'll never forget his response. I asked if Gene Tierney was the most beautiful woman that he ever worked with. He looked somewhat surprised that this 19-year-old kid knew who Gene Tierney was. But he looked at me, he took a moment, and he said, yes, absolutely, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever met in his life. If you don't know who Gene Tierney is, go to Google and look up Gene Tierney, and hopefully you'll agree with Mr. Vincent Price and myself that she is probably the most beautiful woman either of us have ever seen. Anyway, that was my third celebrity encounter, and just each one of them just fascinating. I learned things. It was great. Now for my half celebrity encounter. Probably my favorite author was Gene Shepherd. Gene Shepherd was the author of several short stories that were gathered together and made into the movie A Christmas Story. The narrator of that film is Gene Shepherd himself. Gene Shepherd ended up retiring to my hometown. I did not know it at the time. I only discovered it after he passed away, and it was in his obituary that he died at a local hospital. Let's fast forward past his death about 20 years. I was having dinner in New York with a friend of mine, and the conversation took a turn. I had not known that this friend had been a friend, obviously before his passing, of Gene Shepherd. In the conversation, my friend just turned to me and he said, "John, I got to tell you something." He said, "You are the reincarnation of Gene Shepherd." What? He said, You're just like him. Everything that you do, you're just like Gene Shepherd. It's absolutely amazing to me. Well, I can tell you, rather than taking that as a compliment, I took that as a burden that, oh my gosh, I'm being compared to this great author, this great humorist, oh my gosh, how do I live up to that? Well, that weighed on me for years. Oh my gosh, this guy who knew him makes this comparison. I'm the reincarnation. I'll tell you, it really weighed on me. And now I'm going to get weird on you. I don't know how. I don't know. It must have been in a dream. But I heard Gene Shepherd's voice. And he said, "John, you and I are both slobs. Don't try and be me. Be yourself. Go make mistakes on your own. Don't try and imitate me. Make your own mistakes. Get told no by other people. But then do it yourself and do it your own way." When I woke up and I remember that, it completely took that burden off my shoulders. It was just amazing. If I had probably gone and seen Mr. Shepherd at his house, he probably would have said the same thing to me. "Why are you talking to me? Why are you wasting your time talking to me? Go out and do it. Don't look for advice from me. Just do it." And I guess that's really good advice for each and every one of us. If you have a dream, go out and do it. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode.